I never thought that a person like me was going to have an encounter with a human like him. To this day, I still don't know his name. I'm a scientist that studies the development of technology. From TVs to computers, nothing else seemed interesting to me. I guess you can say I'm from a quaternary society. I was raised in a farm away from any interaction with other children, more of a secondary society. Not a big farm, my father called it a subsistence agriculture trophy. At that point in my life, I didn't care what words my father used or what he meant. Most of my brothers tried, but you would have more luck going back into living a transhuman's life and surviving than making sense of my father. My family was still living in a patriarchal system, to be honest. But my mother was the smartest person in the house. However, there was a question that they never quite answered. But if you would have told me that someone did have the answer before, I would have never believed you. This is how I was proven wrong, and I finally got the answer that I was longing for. I was never fond of small places, and making it worse, the place I was going was dark. The description of the job was real specific. Apparently I was going to know the truth. All the truth. I touched the cold doorknob, not knowing what life-changing event was going to happen on the other side of that door. Just one empty chair, a recorder on the table, and what seemed like another presence taking the other chair, but was covered from head to toe with bandages. No skin showing at all. I began to believe it was just a joke. However, when I turned to reach for the door, the stranger spoke with a gentle tone and said, "You should probably take a seat. It's pretty hard to start an interview from the outside." With my heart halfway in my throat, I took the seat wondering how he could talk in such a gentle tone when he looks like a prisoner. Looking at the clipboard they left me, I asked the first question. "When were you born?" In my mind it sounded like a basic question. He finally answered. I have lost count over the years. Thinking he was just an old man, I didn't ask again, which now, I wish I did. I asked the next question. "What tertiary community job do you prefer, a nurse or a firefighter?" He then answered with a deepened voice, "Those jobs won't exist without me. But I would go with just the primary activity." How peaceful were those days. I decided to ask the next question, realizing the sooner I finish, the sooner I can leave. "Where were you born?" He turned his head to the ceiling like wondering why I'm asking these questions. I responded by saying, "Just answer the question so I can go home." I realized how selfish I sounded when those words left my mouth, and how his next words shot me in the heart. His words were, "Home? I remember when I had that. It's nice." I repeated myself with a harsher tone. "Where were you born?" He then answered, "I was created in the hearth. Don't remember which one, but I cursed the person that put this monster together." Stunned by his previous answer, my scientific curiosity wanted to ask its own questions. So I put the clipboard back on the table and proceeded without it. I asked, "Who are you?" He then replied, "A creature that has been ripped from his happiness." When I was going to ask another question, he interrupted me and said, "What is more important to you, life or death?" Surprised that the roles got reversed, I decided to answer the easy question. "Of course, life." He then replied, "So are you afraid of dying?" My mind then wondered how far actually the door was from where I was sitting at, but it seemed like it was getting further away the more I thought about it. "Sorry to scare you, but I'll rephrase the question. If you were given immortality, would you take it?" he asked. Without a thought, I answered, "Of course, what kind of silly question is that?" What if you made a creation that was supposed to help people, but then the people that you most care about pass away, and you're left to roam in a different world every single time, alone? I then answered, "Well, when you put it that way, I guess not. But what creation did you make?" The next few sentences changed my life. He started, "I have the knowledge of many, but yet I haven't found a way to end this nightmare I relive every day for the rest of my life. I used to be feared. People would tell horror stories about me until when I saw a farmer struggling with his lower back carrying water to and from his crops. To help this poor farmer, I began to dig from the nearest river towards his crops to make his life easier." I interrupted and I said, "Yeah, that's called irrigation." He continued. I mentioned that this place was barely building the pyramids, and so I helped with heavy lifting throughout the night. But that's a story for some other time. I was then open to help people within the shadows. The next farmer was different, living poorly and being under conditions that were surprising to me, that a person can live that long without food. He planted like an ordinary farmer, but then I thought that maybe if we can put these crops in water, they will grow faster. However, never stayed long enough to see if my theory worked or failed. At this moment, I would have stopped him and told him that it did work and it's called terracing, but I had a feeling it would bring him sadness to bring up his punishment of living forever. So I let him live in his past and keep telling his story. He continued with his third story. I met a man by the name of Carl Sawyer, a man who would share my views, but he didn't react like other people when he saw my true self. He instead appreciated me as a friend. We came up with a better way of planting and crossing crops that made new plants. It's funny, I told him. I was older than him and he died before I could ever had a chance of saying goodbye. My thoughts were trying to wrap around the fact that the guy in front of me was actually telling the truth. But these ideas came from this one person. This was made possible because of Colombian exchange, but in reality, it all came from him. The man spoke once again. It's funny how you don't seem to believe me, but please ask me questions and I will say nothing but the truth. I then asked, what's the process of planting a crop where a previous crop was planted before? He answered with no hesitation. That's crop rotation. I remember when I told Sar that he almost laughed at that idea. I said with confidence, anyone can do their research, so you could have already known that. He answered, that would be true, but I've been locked up for 100 years. I looked at the clipboard and there it was, printed at the top. Locked for 100 years, be careful, might escape. My heart stopped for a brief second. He was telling the truth. He might have even helped by introducing the Jethro Tull seed drill. He answered yes. I helped with the drill also. Like if he was reading my mind, I fell into the chair not believing what was happening. He broke the silence by saying, if you still don't believe me then, take these bindings off so you can see what I have to live with. I stood up summoning all my courage to move my feet closer to him. My hands then touched the bandages around his face, and suddenly there was a knock on the door. I remained still for a few seconds until the knock found its way in my head again. I walked towards the door and opened it. I was relieved when I saw a familiar face, my brother. I stepped outside. However, when I went back inside to see the man that helped people flourish was gone. Like if magic, the window was open and straps from the chair unbuckled. He was smart enough to escape by using a bobby pin that held his bandages together. I turned towards the only person by me and asked, where did that window come from? He answered, are you okay, Will? Because there's always been a window in this room. Like that, he was gone. I finally realized why he hated himself so much. He made these inventions to help people, and he probably noticed the enclosure farming that has been happening around and blames himself for changing the way it used to be. He can never feel the satisfaction of being remembered. He came into this world without no one knowing who he is, and he will leave and disappear like he never existed. I forgot to thank him for being the first one to answer the question no one could give me an answer to. Who helped us get this far?